In the next 10 to 15 minutes, or however long this is gonna take, you guys are going to become the ultimate Spright slayers. They're going to die. You're gonna have a tattoo on your arm marking the amount of Spright players that you take down, and we're gonna teach you exactly how to do it. Hey guys, this is Tom Box, and welcome to MST.TV. Today's video is gonna be how to beat Sprights. And being a Spright player myself, exposing my own brethren's weakness, yeah, this is very uncharacteristic of me, but you guys requested it, so I'm doing it. So make sure you guys smash that thumbs up button, hit subscribe, and ding that notification bell, and maybe I'll expose the weakness of other decks that you guys don't like playing against. But anyways, this video is going to be kind of split into two parts, because first of all, you need to get into the mind of the Spright player, so I'm exposing all of their intentions. So at the first part, we're going to teach you guys what the Spright players are trying to do before they even do it, so you can maybe save a couple of hand traps, prevent a couple of misplays, and then we're going to go into part two, which is single hand trap, double hand trap. What are the most effective ways of using those hand traps and expectations of those cards? What are they trying to do on their follow-up? What's so scary about Ronin Totem? Why is Crow so important? And a couple of blowout cards that basically skip their turn or just don't let them play altogether. So that's what we're going to be covering here today. So once again, make sure you guys hit that thumbs up button, check the subscribe button, and ding that notification bell. So anyways, let's get to it. We're going to start a little bit backwards since this is the end combo, which we're going to see basically through every play. So might as well drill this into your head. If they get to a gigantic Spright into a swap frog, or swap frog is already there, that means the elf will have something to revive, and the swap frog will be able to dump the extra frog into the graveyard and the Ronin Totem, leading into the totally awesome. And with Spright elf still alive, which means this play leads to a double negate overall. Since there's so much involved with Spright Elf and Ronin Totem, that essentially makes those two cards a choke point, but keep in mind the stuff in the graveyard that could be additional resources that help them extend, so you don't automatically just make Ronin Totem or Spright Elf's target a go-to. But they are really good, and if you don't know what you're doing, then those would be the two that you would hit right away. So for standard opening plays, from the most standard to some of the weaker plays, we have, of course, level 2 plus blue, level 2 plus jet, and then their starter only, and the additional standard slash negates that they will have is either they have hard open copies of red and carrot, and that would change up the end board, giving them additional negation from the 1 negate to 2 negates, and from the 4 body plus 1 it becomes 5 body plus 2, and usually 5 body plus 2 you're pretty screwed either way. You need almost like a triple hand trap or a double monster hand trap to prevent the board from being built. Now let's start with the weakest board here, starter only. A single hand trap will take care of this no problem because they have no way to protect their monsters, and even if they go starter only plus a red, the magic number here is 4. If they have 3, it doesn't work either, because you can take 2 of the monsters, turn into gigantic Spright. That means they still have the 1 left. But the 1 left, say it's a red or a carrot, it doesn't matter, because if you negate it with an imperm, they're not tributing away their gigantic Spright, because gigantic Spright needs to detach as a part of its effect to get the summon. So that means the red and the carrot alone, they won't do anything with the starter only. That's why the magic number is 4, because that way they can get rid of 2 of the bodies, exceed material them into gigantic Spright, and leaving an additional material for the Spright red or the Spright carrot to negate something that would interact with my gigantic Spright. So that's kind of the rundown of this particular line of why this is so powerful. Then there is also the 5-2, which I've mentioned, where they have the additional negate, where they didn't hard open it, but rather they got jet blue and a level 2. You're going to be facing a full board of stuff, got the double toad thing going on, plus the smashers and the dupe frog, and they might even have more stuff, even hand traps in their hand, and that's just going to be very difficult to play through. Sometimes, maybe when you see something like that, it's time to scoop if you can't break that board. And I talked about the level 2 guy a lot, so what are these level 2 options? Well, first of all, it could just be additional Spright monsters, because they do play a lot of multiples, but for tech options here, Deep Sea Diva, Nimble Beaver, Hop Your Squadron, of course, the wild card Swap Frog. These texts represent different lines that they have access to, such as Deep Sea Diva, they're going to Hawk, they're going to Artifact Dagda, and likely going to a Baron play, but if they don't play the Artifact line, they could just go into Yamada Tako Orochi, which is another tuner that is a Sea Serpent that Diva can summon out, and that means they're going for an early Baron during the stages of board building, and likely when they start with the Diva, they're going to end their gigantic Spright with a Swap Frog into the Toad combo regardless. As for the players that play Nimble Beaver, why give away the tuner access? Well, you can also play play the Nimble Angler on top. Typically, I would suggest the ratio being 3 and 2. 2 Anglers, 3 Beavers. It is somehow the perfect number, because if you go Nimble Beaver and then you summon out your Nimble Angler, that means your Angler in deck still has 2 Beavers to summon out if you activate Foolish Burial. People play this particular line because they want to get additional ways to summon monsters on board. If they swap Frog the Nimble Angler into the graveyard, then that means they got a Chainlink 1, Chainlink 2 kind of situation. They can put the Nimble Angler as Chainlink 1 and swap Frog as Chainlink 2, generating 2 monsters guaranteed. On top of that, everything could have been done basically at the very end. So this is just more or less playing past the double hand trap. Hop Ear Squadron will be an interesting one because you can start with the Hop Ear or end on the Hop Ear, and that just ultimately gives you access to Herald of the Arclight. And additionally, if you start with a Swap Frog, you also have access to Nightmare Corruptor Ibli. This card I don't suggest playing in the main deck because this is the one level 2 monster that does not allow you to do anything once you put it onto the field, because you can't special summon any of your Sprite monsters, so you're stuck with it on board. So you would only summon this out with Gigantic Sprite, only to give it to your opponent so you shut off their hand trap and their ability to access their extra deck unless they're performing a Link Summon. This one usually pairs best with a Sprite Smasher. So if you see them making a weaker board and they give you an Ibli, the back row 100% is Smashers, because once they remove your normal summon, you're screwed either way. So in terms of the board, this is what it looks like when they pass turn to you, and after standby phase the Dupe Frog gets put on field. So they got an attack magnet, they have an Omni Negate, they have a way to revive that same Omni Negate, and if they don't, they will revive something else to generate additional resources. Additional non-standard plays would be, say they have another Omni removal through Smashers, they have a Scythe Log, and maybe a Baron attached with this entire field. It could get really nasty really quickly, and because of the Omni Negate's timing and potential, likely you're going to want to be able to stop everything all at once. I'm going to take a quick breather and talk about MST.TV. First of all, guys, we restocked on all of your favorites, from the box dividers to the oversleeves. You guys have been going crazy about them. And yes, they're fully restocked and available for you guys. Not only that, don't forget to check out our infamous white sleeves that are available to you guys. And don't forget, if you've got the mats available. And yeah, you guys can get it at MST.TV. Thank you for your support, and let's kill Spright some more. First of all, solo hand trap. Keep in mind, this particular chart here is when you only open one. We got another chart for double, but keep in mind, if you only open one, these are the optimal targets for you guys. We're talking about Ash, Ogre, Gamma, Infinite Impermanence, Ghost Bell, DD Crow, kind of the same card, and then the one of Nibiru, one of Ghost Reaper, and one of D-Shifter. If you open any of these as one-ofs, there are optimal targets for you to hit. So for Ash, for say, Ash, if they play a starter, you have to negate it. You don't have a choice, because that means they get a free body if you don't, and that free body leads to another body, and you don't want to play through that. Giving them body is already bad enough, because now they can use that as the anchor to summon every single Sprite in their hand. And unfortunately, you want to prevent them from getting a Spright red. So Ash is basically forced when they play a starter. But when it comes to the actual target, hit the Gigantic Spright, prevent them from getting out the Swap Frog. If they get to the Swap Frog already, then the Gigantic Spright more or less is just a bait, and I'm sorry, the Ash is not enough. Next, there is Ogre. Ogre should only really be focused on hitting the Gigantic Spright. Don't hit the Swap Frog, because they'll just revive, and then they'll just spam the entire board. Really pointless. The Cyframe Gear Gamma, you can take a gamble on hitting the normal summon, but if this is your only card, you're gambling whether or not they have a starter. If it's a normal summon, sure, it seems pretty good, but if they play starter right after that, you're screwed, because that is the only hand trap in your hand, and they're building a full board. So I would say Gamma would be wasted, especially when you can just hit the Gigantic Spright. Just keep in mind that if they negate you at the point of Gigantic Spright, Gamma will no longer be able to activate after that point, because you can't summon out Driver, because it is not a level 2 or lower. Remember, that restriction applies to both players. Imperm, Gigantic Spright, Ghost Bell. Ghost Bell's kind of like DD Crow. Ghost Bell can hit either the Ronin Totem, or you can hit the Spright Elf, the target of Spright Elf. Especially when Spright Elf activates, you can use Ghost Bell to prevent the revival. But Ghost Bell's still pretty useful when it comes to like the Spright Elf reviving the Totally Awesome, so that's still pretty good. DD Crow, kind of the same deal. DD Crow can definitely just go for the Ronin Totem 90% of the time, but if Elf activates to revive a Totally Awesome, you still can use that to kind of Crow it away. You have to time it though. You can't just chain Crow to get rid of it, because they're going to chain their Spright Elf to revive it. Now, as for the weirder hand traps, Nibiru alone is really, really bad. It's never going to succeed. don't bother, because if they only open 2 monsters and they go into Gigantic, you can't summon Nibiru regardless, and if they get into Spright Red, you're screwed either way because they're going to be able to negate it regardless. As for Ghost Reaper, standalone good hand trap that's just like a single copy that's really good. Reaper can take away all the Toad. That will simplify the entire game state when it comes to board building, but they're still going to have a ton of negates because they're now going to leave on board the red and the carrot, or they're going to start going into like Ixies like IP Masquerena, and they're going to go into Unicorns just to spin your stuff away. So they're not completely dead, but it still hurts a lot, and it makes the game a lot easier to manage when it's just like not totally awesome times 2. And D-Shifter, you kind of just skip most of it. They still would probably leave a couple negates on board, but they're definitely not building into that Toad play. So when it comes to double hand traps, expect that one of these hand traps is trading for a negate or an extender, and then the second one is mainly there to prevent the board from being built properly. So when it comes to double hand trap, these are all the pairings that more or less cause me to skip my turn in feel pretty sad about myself. But first of all, Gamma Ash. Gamma, the first normal summon that activates, and then you can just use Ash on the starter. That 90% of the time will skip someone's turn because it's very difficult to follow up on that. That's all 2 cards already, and they probably need 2 more cards to do a Swap Frog extension, and by that time they don't really have that many cards. Then there's Gamma plus Ogre. If you can Gamma straight into, say, the Gigantic Spright, that's fine, but if they have a red on the board, then use Ghost Ogre, the Gigantic, and then they'll chain the red, and then you Gamma the red, you wipe the entire board. Next, Gamma plus Imperm, kind of the same deal, but you can kind of do a little switcheroo on either or because there's no real difference here. Then there is Ogre plus Ash. This is a weaker combination because both of these need to basically directly affect the thing that's activating. So when it comes to this one, I would say try to Ghost Ogre the Gigantic Spright, but try to use Ash on a blue or a starter. You want to prevent them from getting access to the Spright Red, and once you pop the Gigantic Spright without any problems, then there is no board really being built. Then there is Gamma plus Crow. Gamma, the Gigantic Spright, likely going to get negated, which is fine because they're just there to burn the negate, and then you can Crow away the Rodent Totem so you don't have to deal with the double Omni negate. Ash and Crow, kind of the same deal. And then there's also the weird one because this is like super risky. I don't know why you're still playing Nibiru, but if you get Nibiru plus negation hand traps, stop the Gigantic Spright from resolving first of all, and once you stop that, your Nibiru can just land and just wipe the entire board when they're trying to build their Totally Awesome. So there's that, yeah. So far, we've only talked about the hand traps and stuff like that, but what about timing? Let's talk about Crow timing. If there's 0 monsters on the board, feel free to Crow away Toad at any point in the game because they can't revive that Totally Awesome. Same with Call by the Grave. If there's no monsters, Call by the Grave is super safe, and you don't even need to let that first Toad go through. However, if you do have a monster, now you have to play the patient game where you have to wait till the Spright Elf activates. Essentially, all it means is that Totally Awesome first negate is likely going to go through. Otherwise, like, they get to trade a free negate off of you, so that's not really fun either. When it comes to board breaking, 90% of the time, they're going to go for Zeus. Zeus is so easy. However, there is a pattern when it comes to their summoning. They usually just summon 2 monsters on the board right away, and immediately, without committing any additional monsters, so they're going to go into Sky Cavalry or anything that can't really be destroyed by battle, and they're going to swing into anything that's weak or in defense mode, or maybe just clear off a monster that will benefit by going into the graveyard, punch that back into the hand, and then they proceed to make the Zeus wipe. And then for the rest of it, they essentially play it the same as the turn 1. So how do you prevent that? 1, prevent the battle phase. Either compulse away the Centuria, which is great, or just get rid of Centuria altogether right during the battle phase so that they don't even commit into the attack. Or when they commit into the attack, you negate the effect of Sky Centuria, making it die by battle. But even if they die by battle, it doesn't mean that it's over. It's probably because they can perhaps make a follow-up and still make a Zeus, but they cannot make a Zeus with a starter. Just keep that in mind. So is passing turn back to them really that bad? Can they win off of a top deck? And the answer is yeah, that's like the thing that they do. Once they set up their combo, they can recur 90% of their stuff from the graveyard. If Totally Awesome is in the graveyard, summoned properly, Totally Awesome likely retrieved a water monster back in the graveyard to the hand, and Ronin Totem is also there with a Dupe Frog paired with it. So they're guaranteed 2 level 2 monsters already before they even draw their first card. So of course they can rebuild their entire board, but now it's even easier because they don't even need to go into Totally Awesome. Totally Awesome's already there. They're just going to revive the card and they have access to the Omni Negate. That's why they don't need to commit too much, and they can focus most of their attention onto board breaking stuff and then finish off into Gigantic, into Spright Elf, and that means it's the entire full board, except you now don't have any resources. Side deck stuff that you can use against the deck, and if you get to go first, these are some of the biggest blowouts that you can use against them. We have, first of all, Deck Devastation Virus. They're all weenies. So if you activate this, everything in hand dies. The frogs die, the hand traps die, everything die. Deck Devastation Virus is like just a full-on nuke. Unless they have a starter, they're not going to be able to play. And even if they have starter, if you have one disruption on the Gigantic Spright, game's over. Then there is Skill Drain. Skill Drain, at the end of the day, the deck is just full of weenies. So their only way out is to hard draw into Smashers, and that's it. Yeah, it's very limited. Then there is Dark Ruler No More. This is a go-to. You have to negate multiple cards at once. Dark Ruler is really there to do it. Beware of Crossout Designator. That's likely going to be in the main deck, okay? Then there's TC Boo. Well, they can only control one type, so they're thunder based, so that really hurts. Mischief of the Gnomes, this is like a two-way hit because you can set them to level 1 and that really screws them over from special summoning, and you can do it again, you can do it twice, so that's great. Winged Dragon Raw Spear Mode, it's the perfect trifecta killer. You get to kill the Dupe Frog, you get to kill the Totally Awesome, and you get to kill the Spright Elf all at once, as long as you don't need your normal summon. Goes in match, also really good. The deck runs water, fire, and dark, so yeah, you know, go figure, right? And even light if they want to go into Zeus. And there's also Scythe. You can use Scythe, and there's, I guess, honorable mention, you can also use Ghost Reaper, but I've actually gotten hit by Ghost Reaper. I did not die. In fact, I won that game. I just spammed out a ton of Spright monsters and killed my opponent because there's still a lot of negations if you just keep red and carrot on board. So that's the rundown. That's all I got for this video, guys. If you guys enjoyed this video, learn how to kill Spright so that matchup is not going to catch you off guard, well, hit that thumbs up button, hit subscribe, and ding that notification bell. If you guys want to see more stuff like this, you know, leave it down in the comment section. Maybe I'll create another guide for other decks as well, as long as there's enough support for it, all right? And don't forget to check out MST.TV, and I'll see you guys in the next one.